Alright, good evening. It's late. I'm super tired, but I am going to do a little bit of controller modding. So, a while back I got into controller modding. It was when I was building the PlayStation Legacy, and I converted the DualShock 1, the original DualShock. It was like, I don't know, it must be about 19, 20 years old. And I converted that from how many pins is it? Like 8 pin PlayStation 1 out into USB, and then tucked it all in, made it all nice and neat and looked really cool. Well, I was at my friend's house the other day, and he has one of these. Now, I've never seen a Gamecube controller quite like this, with the clear plastic back and the purpley front. It's really nice, but he had an issue with it. The first issue was that one of the triggers didn't work. So I took it apart and basically cleaned it to within an inch of its life. And it's come up super, super clean. Again, you just pull all the electronics out and take the plastic shells, put it in some warm soapy water, scrub it with a toothbrush. Doesn't get much simpler than that. And I got the trigger working again with a little bit of alcohol and a cotton bud. So that works. But the other issue he's got is that it's really hard to go back to classic games when you're not emulating. So when I play PS2, when I play GameCube stuff, it is really hard to go back because there was no standardized controls back then. So you never know whether the camera's going to be inverted. You never know whether you're going to get the option to invert the camera or to uninvert the camera. And there are some games where Y is inverted, but then there are a lot of games where if the camera control, again, in a 3D environment, we hadn't standardized the control yet, so sometimes the X-axis is also inverted. I don't know what kind of savage has the X-axis inverted. If you're that kind of person, I'm staying well away from you because, boy, you've got some kind of issue. So what I'm going to do with this is, when I took it apart, I realized that the C-stick is, for some reason, all of this is on the same PCB, except for the C-stick, which is on its own little daughter board at the back. Like, all of this bit that you can see here, this white bit, that's its own board, for no apparent reason. And there are 4 wires that go from this daughter board into the thing. I think it's because where this D-pad is quite, like, profile-wise, it's actually almost flush to the thing. It can be on the same PCB, but because this is a stick, it needs to go down a little bit further, so they've put in a little daughter board down there, I think. So, that was the big issue that he was having, was that when you go back to something like Super Mario Sunshine, up is down, down is up, left is right, right is left. We've learned since then. We've come a long way. So, I thought, well, what I can do, seeing as it's on a daughter board underneath, and that daughter board has 4 wires going from the small PCB to the large PCB, one of which is like 3 volts, one of which is ground, and then 2 of which are data. I'm guessing 1 for the X and 1 for the Y. So what I did was I unplugged the 4 wires, and I found which one was X, I found which one was Y, and then I found which one was ground, and I found which one was the 3 volts. If I run a switch, so I run those 2 of the wires into a switch. If I run the 3 volts and the ground into a switch, and then cross-solder it, so you can basically just reverse the polarity with a switch, and then maybe mount a switch here on this purple section, because I don't want to, and he didn't want to, but I was never going to drill out this clear plastic bit, because if anything goes wrong, or you want to change it back, or you want to revert it to stock, this purple bit is the way to do it. So I'm going to mount a switch maybe along here, so that when you flick the switch, it just reverses the ground, reverses the 3 volts, reverses the polarity, and this should then invert the X and the Y, in theory. As well as that, so I've got these like 2-pole, what is it? It's 6-pole, 2 throw. So 2 position, 2 pole, 2 throw. I'm not really sure, but these are the right switches. I've used them before. I think I know what I'm doing. So yeah, there's that. And the last thing was that I also bought some replacement sticks, because the rubber on top, on here, is a bit chewed up, and the rubber down here, because this isn't even really a stick, it's more of like a nub, that's also been a bit chewed up, so got some new sticks. All of this was on eBay. This cost me a couple of quid delivered. This cost about a quid delivered, and they've got 10 of them in there. So what I'm going to do now is go into the front room, whip out the soldering iron, take this bad boy apart, put it back together. The only issue that I've got is that at the point where this came out, you can see my electrical tape where I've made a note of the X and the Y. The only problem I've got with this is that this came at a time when Nintendo was still using or I think this is the reason why, they were still using that sort of fire retardant composite in the plastic. So when I cleaned it, it still looked a little bit like somewhere in between like a yellowy brown on some of the edges. And I think that's where it's just discolored over time. I'm not going to do anything about that. You can still see it on some of the joints. I'm not going to do anything about that. It's as clean as it will ever be. And it's still got that kind of tint to it. It's almost like a tint. So, again, there's not a lot I can do about that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the polarity, connect that to a switch, mount the switch along here, swap out the joysticks for new joysticks, and see what happens. So hopefully you should have a nice GameCube controller where you can just flick a switch. If the game doesn't allow you to invert the X or the Y, it'll allow you to do that. Alright, cool. Peace. Okay, this is the inside of the GameCube controller. And you can see this little daughter board is, the only thing on it is their C-stick, when you've got these 4 little points coming in and out. So the top one here, this is the, let me get a pointer. The top one up here, this is the 3 volt up here, then you've got the X, then you've got the Y, and then you've got the ground cable here. So what I did was I just clipped the 3 volt cable, and I clipped the ground cable. And what I've done is I've run them down to, let's focus up now, to this little switch, which then I've done sort of like a cross solder or a cross wire. So when it's in this position, it's actually reversed the polarity, and then when you switch it back, it will go exactly the same as it normally was. The X and the Y go straight into this board on the back. It's a bit messy, it's a bit scrappy, but I haven't sort of done it yet. So you can see these 2 white wires here, this is the X and the Y, and they go straight into the board. And then these sort of dreadlock looking wires that come out, they're the 3 volt and the negative. And all I've done is literally just clip them and solder them together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stick it back into the controller, and then I've cut out a small piece of plastic here, this piece of plastic, which I've tried with this sort of like little prototype tester switch, and it should fit in there nice and flush. See, the standoff goes basically on either side, and then the wire will just come out. So hopefully that should tuck in there nice and neat. And then I'm going to run these extra long cables, I'm going to run them down here and around the board, so underneath the board and then across, where there's a lot of empty space where this motor sits. So I'm just going to run those wires across there. So all I need to do at the minute is make a small square slidey hole here, because you can see I've cut just the switch off. I'm going to make a small little hole there in the blue purple plastic, fit all of this in, and then hopefully it should work. There's really no reason why it shouldn't. Okay, this is the bit that's super boring. I've got to basically make that hole. There you go, make that hole. And because I stick to my mantra of using only like pound shop knives, pound shop files, it's a case of having to, nope, that doesn't quite fit, and then take it out and then file off a bit more, and then do it again, then file off and do it a bit more. This would be way easier with power tools, but then again, I'm doing it for next to nothing. Super boring, but got to keep going, I guess. Okay, about 10 minutes of filing later, but you see the little square we got there? It's a little bit wonky because there's a cutout for the bottom piece to sort of slide into. There's not a lot I can do about that. So again, we've got the little switch. I'm going to put that in. I'm doing this with one hand because I've got my phone in the other hand. But as you can see, got a little switch. There you go. Once it's pushed in and glued in, we go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So it's really not very it's not very pronounced. but still got a satisfying click to it. All right, let's get it all stuck in and give it a test. Okay, so just before I put this thing back together, you can see where I've put the switch and the wires I've just tucked behind this post and underneath here. So this is where the left analog stick is. It's going to come around that and then over. I'm going to take it down this leg and back over the PCB so it doesn't, you know, interrupt any of the touchpads down here. You must remember to put the Z button back in. These are the buttons here, and then we've got the new sticks on, the new plastic sticks. I've taken off the old Grody sticks and put on the brand new sticks. So yeah, I just wanted to show you. Basically, it's just going to go underneath the board. Then I'm going to put the PCB on top. Then it's going to go around the PCB and then attach to the daughter board that will be down here. Okay, here we are. It's all been put back together, and as you can see on the front, if it focuses up, there you go, got a little switch, and it's set into the sort of north position at the minute. Really didn't have to mod too much on the inside. I had to cut away a little bit more of the plastic on the inside, but absolutely no external plastic is missing, and you can't really see anything from the bottom through the plastic. So this isn't actually hooked up to a Gamecube at the minute. It's plugged into my Nintendo Wii, which has got the little HDMI adapter on the back, going into my TV. So, as you can see, okay, so the start button, all the buttons work. And what I'm going to do now is try and do this one-handed. So, as you can see over here, you press left, you go left. You press right, you go right. Now, Luigi's Mansion is an inverted Y game by default. So, if I press down, he looks down, and if I pull back, he looks up. Okay, so you've got left, right, down, and up. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is just flip the inverter switch here. Again, trying to do this one-handed is really hard. So there you go, inverter switch flipped. So now, left is right, right is left, up is up, and down is down. Again, inverted X and inverted Y. So on games where you can't invert the X, you can, and in games where you can't invert the Y, now you can. So for example, Mario Sunshine, both the X and the Y is inverted. So if you flip that switch, it becomes standard control, like 2020 control. So let's flip it back. Again, doing this one-handed is very difficult, but I'm going to flip it from the south to the north position. And now, left is left, right is right, down, up is down, and down is up, just like Luigi's Mansion. So there you go, that's just a quick and dirty controller mod. Like I say, it took not very long, but you know what I mean? It's just a way of going back to classic games. So for games like, well, I don't have a physical copy of Mario Sunshine, but if I did, you just literally plug that in, flip the switch, and everything's standard controls, because we've, you know, standardized them now. Okay, cool. Well, that's it. Just a nice little quick and dirty controller mod. Peace.